Hey there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to another Red Pill Religion podcast, special European election edition. Red Pill Religion, where we say culture, politics, and religion always go together. They can never be separated. So you shouldn't be an idiot about them. You should learn something about them. And if you like the kind of work we do here, please support on redpillreligion.com. We're on our third or fourth YouTube channel, depending on how you count these things. We've been censored many times. So and already have bogus strikes and such. So if you ever lose us, please remember to find us on redpillreligion.com. We're currently doing a fundraiser, trying to raise $1,000 to help out the Freedom from Atheism Foundation, as well as to help us buy better microphones and better podcasting equipment. So please drop a dime in the PayPal tip jar. Also find us on Subscribestar. We're currently looking at WeGather app, and we could take your Bitcoin as well. So please do give us your support. Now, today, I'm pleased to say we haven't had her on in like a year or so, even though she's been on the team for like 3 years and change. I want to welcome everybody. Oda St. Oda. Say hi to everybody, Oda.
Hello, everyone.
And if you're a follower of the Red Pill Religion crew on Twitter, please look for Oda at Oda St. Oda, Oda S-T-O-D-A. She's a lot of fun. You've been on the Red Pill Religion man, you've been here since we were escaping atheism, right? Hasn't it been like since
2000? Absolutely. I've been a while. Mostly the silent partner, but I've been there. Yes.
She has, just so everybody knows, she helps moderate our Facebook group. She runs our Minds account. She runs most of the postings on the blog on redpillreligion.com are from her. And she's one of our Twitter warriors, too. You'll see her and Josh Brister, Apologist Supreme, and Andrew Chatelites mixing it up on Twitter all the time. So if you see her, please be sure to say hi. So, Oda, now you are, I forget how to say your nationality. You live in Belgium.
Yes, I'm a Belgian. So that would be the name of the nationality. It's a small country in Western Europe. But also the place where the capital of Europe is located, in Brussels. It's a country with 3 different ethnic groups. We have a Dutch-speaking community, a French-speaking community, and a very small German-speaking community. And currently, since the European elections, we've had some problems again with these 2 communities because they've voted for completely different parties.
Okay,
the
so
Flemish.
wait a minute. You said that the 2 main nationalities there in Belgium are French and Dutch, right? With a few Germans?
Right. Yes.
You're Dutch, if I recall correctly.
Well, I'm a mix of Dutch and French. I have a Dutch-speaking mother and a French-speaking father. So they're a mixed couple.
So, of course, you live in Brussels.
Which steps to I beg your pardon?
Well, you live in Brussels, where it's a capital and it's a mix of everybody.
I live in Brussels, yes, which is a cosmopolitan city with lots of different nationalities, and where you also have the European Parliament. The European Parliament is located in Brussels.
Exactly. In fact, a lot of people hate Brussels just because they hate the European Parliament. I mean, not everybody, but you know.
A lot of people hate Brussels, yes, but people in Brussels are quite nice, actually.
Oh, yeah, that's not the fault of people in Brussels. So, I mean, we just saw huge sweeping changes. I know you gave us a couple of changes here. Like, for example, well, this is about the UK. Let me get the one, the this is the BBC's page on European elections 2019. And right now, it appears that in most of Europe, what we have seen is a huge surge in nationalist populism. And also
in some countries, but not all. In some other countries, you have a surge in the Green idea, the Green Party, which is also quite interesting.
Well, yes, I was going to say, well, you seem to have seen a huge surge in the populist nationalists, what we would call right-wingers, and we have also seen a surge in what used to be much smaller left-wing parties, like the Greens. It appears that what has really mostly lost has been center left and center right parties.
That is correct. Yes. Yeah.
And so we have a more polarized. We're going to have a more polarized European Union, I guess.
Yes, this is going to be very difficult for coalitions to take shape. Because of course, you have the same in the national governments and the regional governments. And when different ethnicities choose a different kind of configuration, you're going to have a hard time having coalitions of any type, because these different groups who don't want to talk to each other. It's also a problem with political correctness. People on the left and on the center don't want to talk to the far right, or whatever they consider far right. So any populist or right-wing group that isn't traditional would be considered far right.
No, I have and both of these are what's come to the fore. I think that a lot of people think, oh, well, this is going to lead to extremism. I'm not sure it will. Can I tell you why?
Go ahead.
I believe that for some time, international forces, like even above the elected governments, have actually controlled the center left and center right parties in most of Europe, as well as the United States, I might add. That, you know, totally non-democratic, ideological, very wealthy, powerful interests have tended to control the center left and center right parties. And that what you're seeing is a rejection of that as much as anything.
Well, I think people are very angry because they're not being listened to. Whatever people say, whether they demonstrate or not, or whether they express themselves or not, they are simply ignored by mainstream parties who just want to follow their ideology and won't budge, you know, for an inch to respond to the concerns of the people. And well, now this has a result, because some of these far-right parties have said, well, we will listen to your concerns, we'll try to make changes. Of course, this is never going to happen, because these parties aren't allowed to form a coalition with the mainstream parties. So I don't know who is going to win eventually.
Well, let's have a look at the BBC site here real quick. And it shows, just for example, in your own country, I have no idea who these parties are. I don't know, but I'm sure you do. EPP, ALDE, etc.
Well, these are actually I don't think this is the right side, but these are actually groups of parties in your parliament.
Okay.
Maybe it would be better to show another of these that I sent to you.
Which one?
And the first one.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure which one you mean.
Yeah, if you scroll down.
Here, European elections 29.
No, this is another one still. Just a second. If you scroll up again.
Well, I'm not sure what we're looking for.
Just a second, because I think there is a confusion. Well, here you see the explanations of all these different abbreviations.
Well, here's an interesting one.
Yeah, here it goes. Yeah, that's what I wanted to show.
Maybe this shows overall what's going on. Who are the socialists, the Democrats, the Greens, the Liberals? We can see that, yes, Liberals and Greens, who used to be smaller, massively gained.
Right. Right.
But we also see conservatives, populists, and white-wing nationalists also surging, well, especially populists and right-wing
They're also growing, yes.
Yeah.
And you see the ones that are shrinking, now the socialists and Democrats. You see they only have 153 seats, and the same for the right, which has hits very strongly, yeah.
And this is going to be
light blue color.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Now, it's saying here center-right versus conservatives. I mean, I don't know how we would... What is the difference between a conservative and a center-right? I mean, are the conservatives Eurosceptics as well? Not sure.
Let's say that a center-right would be a Christian Democratic Party, like what they would call CDU in Germany, for example. That would be a center-right party. While a conservative party would have more, right-wing ideas on society, etc. Now, what center-right parties object to most are the populists and the right-wing nationalists. They really don't want to talk to them or
And what's
form
interesting,
a type of coalition.
what's going to be interesting there is what's going to happen with the British, because the British just elected something like 20, maybe 25 right-wing nationalists.
Right, and these are the people who were behind Brexit, which is not taking place. Why? Because there are two options in Europe. Either you're part of the European Union, or you're one of these countries outside, like Norway or Switzerland. But these countries have accepted a lot of the legislation of the European Union. You have to understand that the relations and the economy between all those countries is very complicated. So as soon as you talk about export, import, about, for example, planes, about regulations concerning industrial production or labor laws or the free circulation of people, well, these are a lot of rules. And if you have to reinvent them and sign agreements with each individual country, this is going to take a lot of time. Now, the British don't want to have the same arrangements as the Norwegians or the Swiss have, because they think it's too restrictive and still too EU, between brackets. And so they want to do their own thing, but this is not going to work, because if they don't have any agreements with all the individual countries or with the EU, if they don't have a deal, well, trucks will have to stop in front of the borders. So they're going to have a problem with the delivery of goods, medicine, etc. No plane is going to be able to leave British airspace. So this is a big problem. So either they're going to stay in the European Union, or they're going to have to find a deal. But what is this deal going to be?
Well, I know.
The Brits want to have all the, and they want to have advantage, but none of the drawbacks. And that's a bit the problem with the Brits. They've always been like that. I understand yeah.
What's an interesting conundrum is if they do leave, then all of their members of parliament will leave too, which would change the game again.
And they still want to have foot in European Union. You understand what I mean? They still want to have influence, but they don't want to have any of the drawbacks. And it's a typically British problem. They never really want to be part of the EU, but they still want to have their say. And eventually it became too much. The population said, no, we don't want all these regulations. We want to be on our own. But I think they were told a lot of lies, because how are they going to do this? How are you going to conduct relations with all these other countries? It's not that simple, so it's going to take a while, I think.
So you're saying that you feel that within your own country, was there a difference between Dutch versus French voters, for example?
Oh yes, the Dutch voters voted for right-wing parties. Regionally, when you combine all right-wing and populist parties, you're at 40% already.
Wow.
And yeah, and on the French side, they massively voted for the Green Party.
Oh, really?
And for the far left, because they don't trust the Social Democrats anymore, which used to be very powerful in the French-speaking part of the country. But they've also become kind of, corrupt, and a lot of people have lost trust in them. So now they're moving towards the far left. They hope the far left is going to save their social security. The problem is that since the financial crisis in 2008. Our government has been involved in very strong budget cuts, and there are a lot of questions whether people are going to get a pension after 67, because they even actually put the pension age at 67, which is very late because most employers don't want to keep you after 60. A lot of employers even prefer to fire people after 55. So a lot of citizens wonder what's going to happen to them when they get older. And they see that the government is unable to find a decent solution. A lot of the money has been spent on other pursuits. So people are very angry and very worried about that. And then you have the problem with migration, especially Flemish people are worried about that, but also people in the French-speaking part. We have a lot of trans migrants who just settle in our cities. They're in order to leave the country, but they just remain because we don't have the means to kick them out. We don't have enough centers to detain them. They decide to stay. So this is leading to a lot of security problems, also for truckers, for example. Because these people want to go to Great Britain, and then they'll wait for the truckers at truck stops. And these people are by themselves, and then they're threatened by trans migrants. Well, if you don't help us, we're going to do something to you. And so a lot of these truckers feel threatened. The government closed some truck stops in the direction of Calais, which is the tunnel to Great Britain. And they don't know where to stop. And then you have, I work near harbor area, and you see truckers stopping everywhere and not knowing nowhere to go, and it's really a problem. So you have the problem of the pensions, but also of transmigration and migration in general. And then you have a lot of other societal problems because of
I think that if we look at it the way this is, anybody who's got the fantasy that the European Union is just going to fall apart is wrong. I think some are very concerned it's going to lead to war. But I actually wonder if that's true either, because I suspect what's really going to wind up having to happen, like I don't see how it can go any other way unless it goes to civil war or something. That there will be compromises, and that the nationalists will get some of what they want, and there will be changes. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think eventually there might be a break with Eastern Europe, because we are getting a lot of immigrants, but the Eastern Europeans don't want to take them. Countries like Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, etc., they refuse to take immigrants from Muslim countries, which means that they all travel to the West. And of course, this isn't considered fair. So I think eventually there may be a separation between the West and the East. But on the other hand, the West doesn't want to take all the migrants either. So this might lead to nationalists probably, and possibly political changes. But what these changes will be, I don't know. But I don't think there will be a war right away. I think a lot of chaos, a lot of protesting. Perhaps new faces, new parties, a lot of yellow vests. But Europeans are pretty stable people. I don't think they will start being violent right away. No, that would be unlikely.
Well, that makes perfect sense. So you recommended we look at a couple of videos. They're in Dutch, so I'm afraid I can't understand it. But I mean, what are these videos you linked for us?
Well, actually, I wanted to show a contrast between young people today. These young people, for example, the man with the megaphone is a very well-known student leader who he has like a Flemish national students movement where he denounces, migration and other problems today. It's as you see, it's mostly boys, and he came to the picture because our national television station made a documentary on his group. He allowed them to follow the group, etc., for hours, and they made very long interviews. And what did the television do? They just took a few minutes out of these interviews to frame these guys and to prove that they were very dangerous extremists. Now, as a result of this young man was kicked out of college. He was in his last year of law school. He had to go to court. Eventually, he became a celebrity, and now he's going to be a member of parliament because,
really?
yeah, he decided to run for office in order to react against this mentality of censorship and to be able to represent the people that follow him. And then, in contrast, you have this other young woman that you see, and she's like a climate change child. I suppose you are familiar with Greta Thunberg. She's like the figurehead of the climate change movement in Europe.
What's her name again?
Greta Thunberg. Never heard of her?
I believe
it's a little girl with pigtails. She looks like she's 12, but she's actually 16. And actually, she decided to, I think she's being influenced by adults, to stop going to school until governments in Europe would change their climate legislation. And she was followed by a lot of young people on the left, and also teachers who forced their students to demonstrate for the climate. And this girl is the exact opposite of this young man. She's gender fluid. The girl on the right is a Belgian girl, but the girl on the left is Greta Thunberg. She's Scandinavian, and she's the one who started the movement. You see, she looks like she's 12, but she's actually 16. The girl on the right is Belgian, Flemish, gender fluid. Her mother is a family consultant.
This girl on the left here, wait a minute. This girl on the left here, she's 16?
She's 16, yes.
Interesting, but she looks much younger than she is. Interesting.
Yes, and she has Asperger's syndrome, you know. And she started this huge movement. She was even received by Juncker, you know. He's one of the leaders of the European Union. He kissed her hand, and she's a bit like a mystic almost, you know. You had that in the Middle Ages, you know, wonder children that would, you know, meet kings and influence them. She's a bit like that. And she's influenced a lot of young people to demonstrate for the climate. And they will even skip school for the climate once a week.
Really?
Yeah, right. And but they are actually the children of you know, let's say the baby boomers or the grandchildren of baby boomers, and this entire life philosophy of the baby boomers. You know, this gender queer, green hairs. You know, they look pretty clean, but you know that's the idea. And for example, the girl on the right is a lesbian and has a girlfriend. And they want to save the climate, and they want society to change completely, and you know, they want industry to change, they want transportation to change, and they want adults to act now before the earth ends. That's a bit. And we've had.
This is two extremes in the same country, and this is playing out all over Europe, isn't it? Yeah,
right. Because you have these same demonstrations in other countries. This young girl, Greta Thunberg, has been to Germany, she's been to France, she's been to several Scandinavian countries, to Britain, and each time she finds young girls usually who follow her and will also demonstrate, and they're the exact opposite of this young man I showed, who is on the far right. And you also see this gender distinction where young men will, you know, actually respond to groups like you know, with this young man, and then young women will follow the climate group.
So you're even seeing a big gender divide here. You're seeing a gender divide here too, as many people seem to think that the women and young women especially tend to vote left, and young men tend to vote right wing.
It's evolving in that direction, yeah. But this is not really this entire climate. It's not really left wing. I would call it progressive, because you find progressive ideas in all parties, except in the far right. And this is why the far right has so much success. All the people who are against this climate craziness. They say, well, I don't want to, for example, they're afraid they're going to have to pay taxes on fuel, for example, or on driving. And then they go to the far right, who promises that they will protect people against these ideologies.
I genuinely wonder what's going to happen. What I would really like to believe is going to happen is that, you know, this will all, like, the extremes will both settle down, and compromises will be made. I know that what most I just know for a fact most of your more conservative voters mostly just want to be able to have their culture and their communities and their religion the way they like it, and to otherwise to raise their children and otherwise be left alone. And the progressive element doesn't want anything like that, it seems to be. But maybe that's just my perception. And the progressives all just want to build toward this utopian vision.
Right. But the problem is that the progressives are very powerful in the media, in education. They're a bit everywhere, even in the church. And so the far right seems to be the only resistance, which is a bit dangerous, because, you know, how is this going to evolve? That's a question, of course. And a lot of people are afraid that this is going to lead to more extremism and possibly a takeover of the far right. And this is something Europeans are very afraid of course.
Well, the interesting thing is when I look at the EU and the way it's set up, it's very obvious that it was set in such a way, it was brought in slowly to make it harder and harder over time. For example, to get back out. For example, let's just look at the British situation. Same in the comments, he says the UK. Looking at the UK, Same notes that the Irish border isn't going to be solved. And if the Irish border, because the Republic of Ireland has a completely unguarded border with the United Kingdom, the Republic of Ireland, and Northern Ireland.
Yeah, right.
And that is an open border, and Ireland, the Republic of Ireland is staying in, so that if Britain leaves, they would have to have border control from Ireland, amongst other things.
Right. And this is going to be the same problem as with the other European countries, of course.
Same says, and I think you're going to agree with this, it says the political groups are so hostile to each other that they refuse to work with each other. But how does that just not break into chaos? I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
Well, how is that erupt into chaos? Well, you're very disciplined people. I think. A bit of political chaos, but that doesn't mean that there will be as much chaos on the street. We don't have any guns either. You have to understand, if we show up on the street, well, we can demonstrate, we can break a few windows, but other than that, you're not going to have, you're not going to see any guns or any extreme violence. So I don't know what's going to happen with the British. I think eventually they even stop the Brexit.
What I would like to think
it's not impossible. It's not impossible.
Well, I for one think Brexit is not going to happen. That is just what I think. That's just my prediction. I could be wrong. I'm not psychic. Anybody who gets mad at me, don't get mad because I'm saying it's what I want. I think it's not going to happen. But we're going to see. What I'd like to think is that the establishment parties were all being controlled by outside forces, and they've all lost. So even these supposedly extreme Greens or whatever may actually be more reasonable, less progressive and more pragmatic, maybe.
I think the extreme Greens are also financed by the puppet masters in a way.
Yeah,
because there is a lot of money behind this. These little girls, they don't come out of nowhere. When you start following the money, you find lobby groups and you find industry and, a child of that age doesn't become a celebrity like that. You understand?
No, not at all. Not at all. She's being controlled. It is also interesting too. They obviously chose a child. There are some children who don't age. They stay naturally short and look young a really long time. So this makes her look more of a child than she actually is. she's probably got three,
Right.
4, 5 years more in her before she, then people won't know what the. But so we've been going almost an hour now, so we should probably wrap up soon. You give us a couple of other stories. These we've got one in German, and
Right, and there you see that the far right hasn't won a lot of votes. I think the Alternative for Deutschland stays at 10%, which isn't much, but you have great wins for the Green Party, especially in the cities. And that's what I wanted to show, because on YouTube here, a lot of people saying, well, the far right is gaining a lot of votes, but it's certainly not in all countries, and not in Germany, for example. But you see it a lot in countries like Italy, for example, or Hungary, or Britain even.
oh yeah, you're seeing a little bit. You're seeing a little, not much in France, but some in Italy, a good bit in Italy, certainly Eastern Europe, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, quite a few of them. Yeah, I do wonder. See, can they keep the British in? And can they keep Eastern Europe in? And if they can't keep both the British and the Eastern Europeans in, can they even hold the whole thing together?
I think yes, it's possible around Germany. Germany is still the strongest country within the European Union, and I could perfectly imagine a smaller European Union with Berlin as its head, and then a few satellite countries around it.
A lot of people feel that the EU was always ultimately a German project anyway. I mean, I know some dispute that, but there's a lot of reason to say it is. From an outsider, it often looks like more like a German-French project than anything. That's just an impression I have watching, but still.
Well, conspiracy theorists say it's an American project, but
the conspiracy theorists. You know what? I am a conspiracy theorist. I don't think the Americans created the EU, but it would not surprise me if the US CIA definitely helped. It would not surprise me in the least if they helped.
Well, at some point they were even pushing for Turkey to become a member, and can you imagine the catastrophe that would have been?
It makes no sense at all. It makes no sense at all. You know what? Why don't we just add Russia to the European Union? That will fix everything. Yeah, some ideas are just crazy. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been fun to watch, huh?
Well, I think the Russian question is also a problem that was created by the state. We were having quite good relations, and a lot of people lost money with the European sanctions in the West. All these farmers that were selling produce to the Russians, for example, they lost their customer.
I can tell you that the average American has no idea what their government's doing. People don't know what their government's doing. They don't. They have the media here is insanely controlled, and at least as bad as anywhere in Europe. America has this reputation for being the free speech, free press place. It's all smoke and mirrors. Americans do not know what their government is doing overseas. So the only thing I would tell my European friends is just remember that the average American really has no idea what his government is doing.
We realize that. We realize that. That's why I don't blame anyone. You have no control over this anyway, and we don't have control over the powers that be here either. The press is also controlled. They decide who you're supposed to like and who you're supposed not to like, and this is what makes people so angry. They don't want to be taken for idiots. They want to decide for themselves what their opinions are, and this is what you're seeing now. These votes for extreme parties are a sign of the population that they're not taking it anymore, and that they want to have their own government and decide on their own fate, and not allow some elite to control the situation, whatever that is, because that also a lot of theory around that, and I don't necessarily believe them, but you can see that there is a group that is in power and doesn't want to let go, and so we're going to have to fight to regain our independence and freedom.
we haven't even gotten into this, but one of the things I know that your press does not cover, but I have sources from various online sources and academics and people like Dr. Steve Turley and quite a few others. And I don't know if you've seen any of this from where you're at, but one of the untold stories of elections in Europe over the last few years, especially the last few years, is that religious voters are becoming a thing again. I know it's been very taboo to talk about religion in European politics for a long time, and the press doesn't cover it that way. But I happen to know that at the street level, and according to surveys of how votes break out, religious voters were overwhelmingly likely to be nationalists in this election.
Especially Christians, perhaps. But the left supports Islam. You shouldn't forget that Islam is becoming a strong factor due to immigration. And leftist parties will take a lot of Muslim immigrants on their electoral lists just to encourage the Muslim vote. So if you're talking about religion, I would say that the Christian conservatives are more likely to vote for the far right, perhaps, or perhaps also for the Greens, for example, because they want to protect nature. And then you have the Muslims that will, of course, sometimes vote for the left because they know that the left protects them. But what is very interesting is that many of these people on these socialist lists are not secular people themselves. So we've had some very strange flyers saying that, yeah, well, we don't oppose, for example, the hijab in public schools, and we will do everything to protect your privilege to wear the hijab and to slaughter your sheep, on the feast of the sacrifice, etc. Because there is a lot of protest against that from the local population, the native population, because they find that offensive that animals are being slaughtered in a way that is kind of DIY and cool. And but especially people from North Africa, when they have their feast of the sacrifice, each man needs to sacrifice his own sheep. And this has been quite controversial in various countries, and in some regions they will forbid it, or at least force the people to stun the animal before they kill it. But some parties will protect the right of these groups to kill the animal without stunning it. And
you know what? Go ahead.
Yeah, and the left actually supports, and sometimes even the Greens support the right of these minorities to slaughter their animals in their traditional way. Personally, I think cruel, and I think that it shouldn't be allowed because we're in the West and we have our homes. But it's a point of discussion.
Well, it is a point of discussion, yeah. And then, of course, the way the Muslims wind up in. Yes, right now the progressives have brought in a lot of Muslims. Very, very short-sighted, foolish thinking in a lot of ways. Not that I often get accused of being pro-Islam and pro-Muslim, but I merely view it as a complicated issue. And ultimately, as a Christian, I want them to become Christian. But if that's not going to happen, you got to be able to be at peace with them. And they're bringing the people, the immigrant Muslims they bring in are in no way ready to assimilate, or at least so many of them. And so they seem useful to the left, and so they seem like the leftist parties are their friends. But then, as soon as the left and progressives start trying to teach their kids transgenderism and free love and all that stuff, they don't want anything to do with that, and that's going to matter too in the long run to the politics.
Yes, but you have cultural relativism also. And when you look at the left, they have some rules for white people, and then they have different rules for people of other cultures. For example, they expect a perfect gender equality among the white people. They want white people to be gender equal, women to have male careers, etc. But it's okay for Muslim women to wear a hijab and stay home. That's because it's culture. You see?
Yes.
So there's a society with two different norms and two different set of rules. That's how it works.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I don't know how, well, you know what though? The thing is, it's either they're going to find a way to make it all work or you're going to collapse. I don't know which it is, you know? I mean, what do you think is going to happen the next 5 years, let's say?
Next 5 years, I don't know. It's difficult to tell. I can't imagine a collapse that quickly, of course, but I don't know. It all depends how all these new populist parties manage to gain power and gain influence, and how these others are going to react. What I find a very good sign in Belgium is that our king, who is like a mediator, has invited all the different parties and all different presidents to talk with him about the formation of the government. Because we not only had European elections, but also national and local elections. And in the past, it would have been unthinkable for the king to meet people of the far right. That would have been politically incorrect and rejected by other parties. But this time he ignored this politically correct rule and he invited them anyway. And I think that is a sign that perhaps different types of negotiations are going to be opened. But I don't know. It's very interesting to see what's going to happen now.
It is. I notice everybody is rushing to put their spin on it. What I tend to do is look at the long term. You know, I always take the long view. It's always very exciting. There's a new election. Yay, we won, or yay, the other guys lost. But now you have to govern. Now these new parties have all come in, and now they have to produce whatever they're going to produce, and that's going to be interesting to say the least.
And that will yes.
Go ahead.
It will certainly be a challenge for our king, because we are a monarchy, and it's the role of the king to assist the formation of the government. So, and it's his best interest that the Belgian state continues to exist. So he's going to try everything he can to create a kind of connection between all these different parties. I'm very curious.
You're very curious. Go ahead.
I'm very curious what's going to happen now, what he's going to do. Whether he's going to succeed at all.
It fascinates me. I think most Americans probably aren't even aware that Belgium still has a king, or that the king still has political power. I mean, is this one of those situations like the British, where basically he has some limited constitutional power, like he can? What are the limits of power?
He has some. He is the head of state, first of all, but he has limited power to create a government or dismiss the government, and because we have the parliament, which is elected by the people, but the government itself is an executive power, and the people in that government are not necessarily elected. So it's kind of like a cabinet, and
yes. So that most of the European countries that still have monarchs, the monarchs are probably still very confused right now too, because they don't know who it's safe to be sitting near, do they? It is fascinating.
Yes, and they do play their role. So this is going to be well, very animated, because this monarch has had a very difficult time getting respected. His father was, I would say, someone who was a pretty nasty man, I think, and he didn't protect his son against the media sometimes, and the media was against the monarchy at some point, especially in Flanders. And so they would take any occasion to make fun of him and to convince public opinion that he had some mental issues, that he was gay, that he wasn't a real man, that he was an extremist, or that he was too dumb to rule. And as soon as he was able to rule, he turned out to be a completely different man than what the media said of him. So now he will really have to prove himself, because he's going to have to create a country out of people that basically want to work together. So
nobody wants to work together anymore, but they may be forced to. Well, this has been fascinating to listen to, and knowing how it looks to the average European, especially you're in the center of it all. You're right in the middle, right there in Brussels.
I'm right in Brussels, yes.
And you get to see what's really happening in a lot of ways, but even your media is controlled too. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, a lot of people are triumphant, but I think we're still going to see a lot more fighting, a lot more arguing, and a lot more strife, don't you?
A lot of discussion. Most definitely.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, this has been fun. I hope we can do this again, Oda. We had a little bit of a technical issue, but hopefully we can absolve that. Is there any final thought you wanted to get out today?
Well, I would say, pray for us, and let's hope that everything turns out all right.
Yeah, that's all. That's the most important. Some will say that's all we can do. I think it's the best thing we can do. Pray, and pray they save Notre Dame too while we're at it. So, all right, I'll tell you what. We got a stream coming up later tonight on the with the Freedom from Atheism Foundation, along with our fundraiser with them, and we have an interview coming up with James Bishop, the South African Christian apologist. We have shows planning coming up every single night, so come check us out here on redpillreligion.com. Please also go find and follow Oda St. Oda on Twitter, and also look for Andrew Sutelites and Josh Brister on there. They're the ones representing the Red Pill Religion team on Twitter. I don't do Twitter anymore. I got too crazy on Twitter, so I can stay off. So anyway, meantime, everybody, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Find us on redpillreligion.com, on Minds, on Dissenter, and other social media. And God bless everybody.